Deal or Death is a social deduction game that requires at least 5 players. Each player is dealt an identity, each with their own victory conditions. The scenario? The Paperclip Corporation is in trouble, and 2 executives on the board are vying for control of the business by making deals with as many shareholders as possible. Shareholders are looking to make the best deal with the executive who comes out on top. All the while, the board has been infiltrated by individuals with their own goals and plots that don't benefit the company or the executives. To play, you'll need a location with 3 separate areas. There will be secret discussions taking place in these areas, so eavesdropping should not be able to happen. Each session should have at least 2 executives, 2 shareholders, and the anarchist. If playing with more than 5 people, add more roles as needed. You can pick which roles are going to be added, or leave it up to chance for even more suspense. Once the role cards are selected, shuffle them up and deal 1 to each player. Players should not reveal their roles unless the rules tell them to. Speaking of which, the executives reveal their roles and take 5 paperclips plus 1 paperclip for every player in the game. So for a 5-player game, that would be 10, and for 11 players, it would be 16. These paperclips represent shares in the company, money, or anything else that the board members would value. The executive players will be offering these paperclips to make deals, which we will be going over in a little bit. If there are at least 7 players, the executives can also take a VP star, which can help get some cooperation from board members later. The others secretly take a token from the box, paperclips for shareholders, and skulls for infiltrators. Now that all the pieces are in place, the game can really begin. To start a game, the infiltrators secretly reveal their identities to the anarchist. Then the anarchist reveals their identity to the intern. With this secret knowledge being shared, it's time for meetings. Each executive holds a 2-minute meeting with each of the rest of the board members. Their goal again is to make the most deals. The shareholders they are trying to make deals with have goals too that the executives need to take into consideration. These goals are A. Make sure that they're making a deal with the executive who's going to win, and B. To be the shareholder with the most paperclips at the end of the game. With these goals in mind, the executive needs to balance generosity with frugality. Too many paperclips promised, and they won't be able to afford to win over more than a few shareholders, which means they won't win the game. If they promise too few paperclips, the other executive might outbid them. If a negotiation needs to go on a little longer with a certain board member, the executive can call for a 2-minute extension once per game. The other executive during this extension may also use their extension to keep talking with the board member they're talking to, or plot alone for the next 2 minutes. Something to keep in mind that I got caught up on is when executives make deals, it's not in exchange for anything tangible. A deal in this game is the executive promising to give the shareholder a certain amount of paperclips, and the shareholder taking them up on that offer. Shareholders can only choose one executive to accept paperclips from at the end of the game, and as we'll see soon, if they don't get what they're asking for, the deal can fall through, and both players will be in trouble. To make things worse, the executives have to be cautious when negotiating because they might not be talking to a shareholder at all, but instead could be dealing with an infiltrator. There are 4 types of infiltrators in this game, and there will always be at least one out there trying to mess things up for the other players. First off, there's the anarchist. They're in every game. Their goal is to make sure that neither executive has made more deals than the other. In that case, both executives lose, and anarchy reigns supreme. As stated before, the anarchist knows who all the other infiltrators are at the beginning of the game, and should use this knowledge to gain the upper hand. Next, there's the intern. This board member has been mistreated and ignored by management to the point where they'd be happy to see the company fail. The intern's goal is to make the anarchist win. They start the game knowing the anarchist's identity, so the 2 of them should find ways to work with each other to make sure that the executives don't win. Third, we have the entrepreneur. Their goal is to end the game with 5 or more paperclips at the end of the game. It doesn't matter which executive wins, the entrepreneur is only in it for the cash. Lastly, we have the consultant. They don't know who's who at the beginning of the game, but they do want the anarchist or the entrepreneur to win. The catch is, though they may use any method of guile against the other board members, the consultant cannot lie to the executives during their negotiation. If an executive makes a deal with an infiltrator, it doesn't count towards their goal, so learning who to trust is key. Executives will want to use their influence and deductive reasoning during the meetings to gain information from the other players about who they can trust and who they can't. When the board members aren't in meetings with the executives, they can network freely amongst themselves. No one is required to talk with anyone else or even tell the truth, but it could be a good chance to find out what's going on behind closed doors, plot with fellow infiltrators, and possibly find out who's who. If a board member wants to learn the true identity of another player, they can spend their token to look at one other player's identity card. If an executive trusts somebody enough to give them a VP star, the recipient can spend this in lieu of their token. Why this might be important is, for shareholders, their token counts as a paperclip as well. So if you're trying to be the one with the most paperclips at the end of the game, this can put you at a disadvantage. Once both executives have held meetings with every other member on the board, it's time to wrap things up. Each executive chooses one board member to negotiate for a second time. This is a good time for the board member to share what they've learned or mislead as they wish. If both executives choose the same person, they take turns. Once the final negotiations are concluded, the executives may look at all spent tokens to see who's been spying on each other. Then the board meeting begins. Each executive privately writes down a proposal for how many paperclips they will give each board member. They can't offer more paperclips than they actually have, so they will need to decide how to split their resources wisely. At the same time, each board member will write a proposal for whose paperclips they are willing to accept, as well as how many they're expecting from them. They are only allowed to accept paperclips from one executive. Once this is done, all proposals are turned over simultaneously, and the players then match proposals. If the executive offered a board member the same number of paperclips as they asked for, or more, the deal goes through. If they offer less, the offer fails. If Executive A offers paperclips to a board member, but the board member chooses to side with Executive B, then Executive A doesn't get a deal either. After the number of deals have been calculated, the winners are determined by their objectives. Will the infiltrators run the business? Will the shareholders get what they want? Will the company survive? That's all up to you. And until next time, this is Hogwash, over and out. Catch you later.